everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at the drawn and quarterly release Offshore Lighting by Saito Nazuna. This book was translated by Alexa Frank. It collects a bunch of short stories from the artist Saito Nazuna. So I'll just go through, give a little bit about what each story's about or images that I found compelling from each story. This first one's called Towards the Sunset. Most of these stories are pretty down-to-earth, slice of life type things. On this one here, I just really like this panel structure that Nazuma did, where there's like this slanted bit here, and then there's this piece of ice that this kid wants to crack, which is what the majority of the story is about. There's a piece of ice shattering. And I like the way that makes an exclamation point. Given that that's a Japanese artist, I don't know if they use the exclamation point in their like punctuation or whatever. So I don't know if that's intentional, but it seems intentional to me that it's making this big mark. I don't know if that's referencing something in Japan. There's no translation note on it, but it stood out to me as an intentional visual decision. This story here is the title story, Offshore Lighting. Has this character that seems to be being sent to have a relationship with a geisha who's a virgin, and he's going to be like her first customer. This and some of the other stories struck me as slightly autobiographical. There's something about the way the author constantly is referring to being a manga artist in some of these stories that makes me think that they're intended to be autobiographical or suggest that these are loosely based on real life stories or something. I'm not sure. This story here, Parakeet God, is another one that seems potentially autobiographical. It's about Atsuishi, this character here who's an aspiring manga artist, and he's got this pet parakeet. A lot of the stories seem to revolve around people dying. Like here it says whenever someone dies at the hospital, this happens. Obviously his partner or wife is a nurse, and so like she's getting out that frustration by coming home and getting some good chemicals released, and that's part of that story. But I do think that seems to be a big part of the artist's inspiration for a lot of these stories, and I really appreciated that about this book, is it's very adult and mature in that sense of dealing with the situations that adults deal with. Like, you know, me having seen Tori in nursing school and then preparing for the idea that I could have a partner that would be seeing this kind of stuff and how that would impact a relationship. That all seems, you know, very, very real to me. Not that she would come home and jump your bones immediately, but there would be psychological impacts on a relationship from working in that environment. As you'll see in some of the later stories, they deal very explicitly with death of parents and things like that. This is about a guy. This is called Buy Dog Food, Then Go Home. It is about a guy who's buying out to buy dog food and then gets distracted and getting in trouble. So again, like adult stuff that should be just kind of boring everyday stuff, but the artist is able to write these things and draw these things in a way that's very, very compelling. This story here, Countdown, is where the death and dying really kicks in. It's about a family whose father is dying, and here you can see there's a countdown going on where this is like the last day before he dies. There is a really cool grouping mechanism in this story, just in the way the panels are composed, where like this is tying up day one, and so there's a connection here connecting this all together, and they almost make like a little court here for this panel and the number to be in. I really like that as a visual grouping mechanism. And then the drawing of the birds in this is really awesome. I absolutely love this panel here. It's so simple, so elegant, such a beautiful rendering of a bird, such a great composition. Like a lot of the other Garo manga artists and the Sugeis and people like that, the stories are pretty short and they have usually kind of vague poetic endings. These, I don't know that they were in a magazine like that. These were all done in the 90s and early 2000s. So this is historical, but not as historical as like the Yoshihara and Tadao Suge stuff that Drawn and Quarterly is putting out. Mother of Pearl Ship is another one about a dying mother There's a really beautiful, like, just you can see these really beautiful abstract compositions here at the end. They're an answer to a kind of like rosebud mystery throughout the story, where they think the mom is losing her mind and going senile and talking about something that doesn't make sense, and then the characters figure out why it makes sense in the end, and it leads to these kind of images here, which I think are really, really beautiful. This story, Jinko's, again, a family kind of dealing with family memories and whatnot, but there's a ginkgo biloba tree. Really like the rendering of the leaves. Again, the compositions here and the descriptions of them, like glittering down like gold. There's just all that really subtle awareness of the environment around you and things like that that you get in the manga that you don't normally get in the American comics that are, playing out here just as well as in any other manga. This story's called Upskirt. It's about some kids going out and collecting bugs and seeing up a lady's skirt. And this one also has like the adult and then the memory as a kid and the psychological impact of those experiences on somebody. So another really cool story, really fun art there. Then this story, In Captivity, I think is a big jump in time for the artist. There's a bunch of stories that are like Upskirt is in 1992, so 91 through 92 for the first set, and then In Captivity is 2012, and House of Solitary Death, the last one, is 2015. So you have an artist that apparently took a big jump in their production. There's a little bit in the back about that, and there's a little bit in the last story where it gets very autobiographical, where you have the artist basically talking about, I just don't know what to do anymore either. Like the artist realizes that they're living kind of a life that doesn't lend itself to stories other than autobiography, and that seems to be bothering the artist to some extent. But you could see there's a real jump in approach and style, whereas the earlier stuff is more cartoony, much simpler artwork, cleaner, not as dark, very light. This story here has a lot more tone in it. It has a lot more hatching. I think the compositions get more surreal and experimental. There's more detail. And it's just continuing the idea of a parent dying. And here you have a parent dying from dementia, I believe, again. So that seems like something that this artist probably went through with her family. And just some of the things that are in here remind me quite a bit of, going through the death of Tori's mother with her and just the impact that had on her psychologically. But I also do find that there are scenes in this that really show like what it is like to be in those morbid moments in life where the family's in the car and they're kind of like being able to laugh at the things the demented mother is saying. Didn't she tell you she had a baby? She even gave it a name and everything. And then they point out that the baby is basically like the person next to her informs him, this is his memory of being informed, that really she'd just been constipated for a couple days and finally was able to shit, and in her delusional state thought she had a baby, and that she named the baby after someone from the tale of Genji. And they're sitting in the car talking about this thing that should just absolutely devastate them in terms of how much their mother's gone. But it's also just such a legitimately hysterical thing. Like, she took a shit and thought she had a baby and like named it, like was so deluded that she named it. And they're able to laugh about it and also admit, like, we shouldn't be laughing about it, but like that's legitimately funny. And Tori and I have had some situations like that lately with her health where there's just absolutely terrifying things happening to her, but they lead to physical consequences that look so strange that they're funny from a physical comedy standpoint. And I just can't express like what a strange emotional mix that is if you haven't felt that. Watching someone you love look like they're maybe going to be dying, but also like what's happening is just so strange that you can't help laughing. We've had a couple of those moments recently. She's not dying, but some real scary moments that were also humorous, and it is a very weird place to be in And I think this artist captures that absolutely beautifully. And that's what I'm saying. It's mature. Like, this is stories you can't write unless you've been through some real shit, unless you've had a family member die, and, that kind of thing, like the worst circumstances in life. And I really appreciate stories like that, because that's where I'm at in my life now. We're dealing with hard stuff, and I need some people who have dealt with hard stuff in their art, dealing with it in their art. Some people who have dealt with hard stuff dealing with that in their art. This, again, you can see has much different art, much more intensely detailed, strange compositions. I really, really enjoy this. I think it's too bad that this artist feels like she has nothing left to say because as she gets older, because I found that these last two stories are by far the best two stories, exactly because of all of the life experience, the surreal stuff to try and communicate the psychological damages. Like, here, this weird little baby root thing chewing this lady up. Just really great visuals. Another really awesome visual here. There's a lot more. I don't want to give them all away, but this right here, just this idea of like all the connections in the universe, how everything's connected, what it counts as coincidence, what fate is, all of that kind of stuff. I think it's a beautiful visual. This one then is House of Solitary Death. Again, I think this is autobiographical, even though there's, the character names don't match up with the artist's name necessarily. But they ask here, are you still drawing manga? Well, nothing at the moment. The older I get, the worse I get at coming up with stories. Though the number one reason is that I can't find work. Oh, so manga's like that too, huh? I have been thinking about restarting my job hunt. I was out of money, but it was a total wash. Aging is a losing battle. There's no getting around it. I was competing against all these energetic young people. So the author's lamenting their status as like someone who's older, doesn't have anything to say. There's exciting, energetic new artists coming up. But I really hope that this artist is still making stories, because this is much more valuable to me. I don't know that it has such a big audience, but it's very valuable. And this is dealing with the artist also. And again, I don't know how autobiographical these are, but talking about a nervous breakdown moment the artist had, where they had temporary, at least the artist in the story seems to have had a temporary bout of schizophrenia, but feels like they're over it, but is still mapping these kind of imaginative things on top of other people. And you don't know if this is just an artist like seeing this woman and thinking she reminds the artist of a chicken, or if this is actually like a strong visual hallucination that the character in the story had. When you do get to the back, there is an essay in the back and an interview and some explanation of the stories. I don't, like I say in all the videos, I don't really have time to go reading all these essays as well. I'm just trying to read comics and move on and get a video recorded. But I did have to go through this one to see if there was some autobiographical content. And it does seem like a lot of this comes out of real life experiences and then gets filtered into a slightly autobiographical book. But here it says, in 2018, she began publishing news stories under the title Big Comics Original Zokan. By the end of the same year, after publishing two stories, Saito's health took an unexpected nasty turn. She suffered a stroke. I couldn't draw the third one. I was so distressed that I smoked an unreasonable number of cigarettes, and then I collapsed, thinking to myself, I can't draw. So that frustration about not being able to draw, even though that was in 2018 and that story was in 2015, I think, this does seem to have some relationship to the author's real life. I don't know how many other works this artist has produced. It looks like there's some other ones being referenced here, and potentially a series that this artist has done. So I think this artist has produced a lot more work than is collected here. Given the impact that this art has made on me, these stories has made on me, I really, really hope that there are other works from this mangaka, because I found them to be exactly the type of book I'm looking for. That mature, someone who's actually lived through the tough adult stuff in life, kind of digesting that in a story is what people that are going through things like what I'm going through need, I think. So I hope there's more by this artist. And what, the stuff in here is of such high caliber and high quality, especially the writing and the artwork in the later pieces, that I'm definitely interested in and would get anything else. So hopefully there's some more collections already out or coming out, because I really, really enjoyed this book and would highly recommend it to everyone else. House on Fire by Matt Battaglia is a just gorgeous book where Matt's kind of making an emotional response to the years of COVID and wrapping that into a sci-fi dystopian future that really the sci-fi dystopian's backgrounded, and you're focused on the emotional journey of two characters in a really beautiful way. And then that's enhanced by Matt's like really awesome, loose, kind of Paul Popish dry brush work. And then Sean and Matt have worked to get this second kind of orange spot color in there that's going to look really, really beautiful, and it has allowed Matt to use his dry brush technique to add tone to the thing too. So with Sean's production technique, this is going to be a gorgeous book with a lot of heart.
Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.